If something's important enough, you should try, even if the probable outcome is failure. When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor. Life is too short for long-term grudges. I'd rather be optimistic and wrong than pessimistic and right. Some people don't like change, but you need to embrace change if the alternative is disaster. Patience is a virtue, and I'm learning patience. It's a tough lesson. If you're trying to create a company, it's like baking a cake. You have to have all the ingredients in the right proportion. If you get up in the morning and think the future is going to be better, it is a bright day. Otherwise, it's not. I think it's very important to have a feedback loop, where you're constantly thinking about what you've done and how you could be doing it better. I think that's the single best piece of advice. Constantly think about how you could be doing things better and questioning yourself. I think it matters whether someone has a good heart. I think there should be regulations on social media to the degree that it negatively affects the public good. People work better when they know what the goal is and why. It is important that people look forward to coming to work in the morning and enjoy working. People should pursue what they're passionate about. That will make them happier than pretty much anything else. It's okay to have your eggs in one basket as long as you control what happens to that basket. We're running the most dangerous experiment in history right now, which is to see how much carbon dioxide the atmosphere can handle before there is an environmental catastrophe. I think you should always bear in mind that entropy is not on your side. Great companies are built on great products. I always invest my own money in the companies that I create. I don't believe in the whole thing of just using other people's money. I don't think that's right. I'm not going to ask other people to invest in something if I'm not prepared to do so myself. Starting a business is not for everyone. Starting a business, I'd say, number one is have a high pain threshold. It's very important to like the people you work with. Otherwise, your job is going to be quite miserable. I think that's the single best piece of advice. Constantly think about how you could be doing things better and questioning yourself. Rockets are cool. There's no getting around that. When I was in college, I wanted to be involved in things that would change the world. There have to be reasons that you get up in the morning and you want to live. Why do you want to live? What's the point? What inspires you? What do you love about the future? If the future does not include being out there among the stars and being a multi-planet species, I find that incredibly depressing. If you go back a few hundred years, what we take for granted today would seem like magic. Being able to talk to people over long distances, to transmit images, flying, accessing vast amounts of data like an oracle. These are all things that would have been considered magic a few hundred years ago. I will never be happy without having someone. Going to sleep alone kills me. The value of beauty and inspiration is very much underrated, no question. But I want to be clear. I'm not trying to be anyone's savior. I'm just trying to think about the future and not be sad. I think life on Earth must be about more than just solving problems. It's got to be something inspiring, even if it is vicarious. If I'm not in love, if I'm not with a long-term companion, I cannot be happy. When I was a child, there's one thing I said: I never want to be alone. That's what I would say. I don't want to be alone. To make an embarrassing admission, I like video games. That's what got me into software engineering when I was a kid. I wanted to make money so I could buy a better computer to play better video games, nothing like saving the world. If humanity doesn't land on Mars in my lifetime, I would be very disappointed. Really, the only thing that makes sense is to strive for greater collective enlightenment. I think we have a duty to maintain the light of consciousness to make sure it continues into the future. Brand is just a perception, and perception will match reality over time. Sometimes it will be ahead, other times it will be behind. But brand is simply a collective impression some have about a product. If you're entering anything where there's an existing marketplace, against large, entrenched competitors, then your product or service needs to be much better than theirs. It can't be a little bit better, because then you put yourself in the shoes of the consumer. You're always going to buy the trusted brand unless there's a big difference. The problem is that at a lot of big companies, process becomes a substitute for thinking. You're encouraged to behave like a little gear in a complex machine. Frankly, it allows you to keep people who aren't that smart, who aren't that creative. A company is a group organized to create a product or service, and it is only as good as its people and how excited they are about creating. I do want to recognize a ton of super talented people. I just happen to be the face of the companies. The path to the CEO's office should not be through the CFO's office, and it should not be through the marketing department. It needs to be through engineering and design. I think it's very important to have a feedback loop, where you're constantly thinking about what you've done and how you could be doing it better. I do think there is a lot of potential if you have a compelling product and people are willing to pay a premium for that. I think that is what Apple has shown. You can buy a much cheaper cell phone or laptop, but Apple's product is so much better than the alternative, and people are willing to pay that premium. Man has the power to act as his own destroyer, and that is the way he has acted through most of his history. If you want to grow a giant redwood, you need to make sure the seeds are okay, nurture the sapling, and work out what might potentially stop it from growing all the way along. Anything that breaks it at any point stops that growth. The future of humanity is going to bifurcate in two directions. Either it's going to become multiplanetary, or it's going to remain confined to one planet and eventually there's going to be an extinction event. What most people know but don't realize they know is that the world is almost entirely solar-powered already. If the sun wasn't there, we'd be a frozen ice ball at 3 degrees Kelvin, and the sun powers the entire system of precipitation. The whole ecosystem is solar-powered. Trying to read our DNA is like trying to understand software code, with only 90% of the code riddled with errors. It's very difficult in that case to understand and predict what that software code is going to do. With DNA, you have to be able to tell which genes are turned on or off. Current DNA sequencing cannot do that. The next generation of DNA sequencing needs to be able to do this. If somebody invents this, then we can start to very precisely identify cures for diseases. If anyone thinks they'd rather be in a different part of history, they're probably not a very good student of history. Life sucked in the old days. People knew very little, and you were likely to die at a young age of some horrible disease. You'd probably have no teeth by now. It would be particularly awful if you were a woman. There have only been about a half-dozen genuinely important events in the 4-billion-year saga of life on Earth. Single-celled life, multicelled life, differentiation into plants and animals, movement of animals from water to land, and the advent of mammals and consciousness. I just want to retire before I go senile, because if I don't retire before I go senile, then I'll do more damage than good at that point.